Hello, everyone. I'm Mike Cannici, and welcome to another edition of Valley Sports Rewind. And back by popular demand, we have the one and only John DeFrancisco. And Coach, it's an honor to have you back on again. We had so much fun. We're going to have a blast again.
Thanks a lot, Mike. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad to be back. I had a blast myself.
Now, Coach, before we get into we're going to talk about the 1996 team a little bit, but before we do, you threw out the first pitch the other day, what is probably going to be the last home game ever at Derby on the old baseball field. So talk about that a little bit. How was that?
I was really honored to do so. When Steve Boehner asked me if I would do it, I willingly accepted. I spent a lot of time on that field, and it was an honor. And it was also an honor to have Tom Fay catch the first pitch because he was my mentor. I worked for him for 17 years before I got the head job, so it was a lot of fun. The first pitch wasn't really too good. I bounced it, but the second one was a strike. So I really had a good time. It was memorable, and it's something I'll never forget.
Right, and you had a lot of great moments on that field. I always think of the Cheshire game in '92 with the Joey guy on the home run. That was probably the biggest, but there were some great memories. Is it bittersweet? Are you sad to see it go, or are you okay with the change?
Well, I think the change was inevitable. I really thought that having the track in the middle of the baseball field was detrimental. I really didn't like that, but it was not for me to say. I think the new specs that they have that I saw through Andy Mancini, who's part of the project, looks awesome for the baseball field and the softball field, and the football field. So I think that what they're doing is going to be beneficial, and it's going to be beautiful.
Right. And, you talk about the track, that's another thing people probably don't realize. You spent many years walking that track at like 5 o'clock in the morning. You and a bunch of, I think some of the old Sparrows guys would walk,
Absolutely.
And so, you were constantly on that track all the time. So, I mean, You've had a lot of memories there, and most of them have been great.
Yeah, they have. Like you said, I walked the track at 5 o'clock in the morning with my wife and Mrs. DiCenso and a few other elderly people, and that's really funny because I never really got to see their faces that much. So a few times seeing them about, they say, "Hi, John, how are you?" I didn't know who they were because I really couldn't see because it was dark when we walked the track at 5 in the morning. But yeah, that was a lot of fun.
Right. So let's talk about the 1996 baseball team. That was an unexpected year, I think, for a lot of people. The 95 team had went 15-5, one of the best teams you probably ever coached. And I think a lot of people felt that team was going to go all the way, and they got knocked off in the quarterfinals. But talk about the 96 team, and what were your expectations going into that year? If
I could just go back for a second, we got knocked off by Lyman Memorial. That was really, in 95, it was really a hard bus ride home. I don't think the kids expected to lose. I didn't. The emotions were really running high, and we had to come home. It was late when we got back, and it was hard to console the kids. After they graduated, from that team, I lost 6 players. I lost Steve Owens, Steve Tilke, Chris Ruther, Joey Leza, Joe Cabral, and Tommy Leonard.
Right.
So basically, I had to rebuild a whole new team from 96, and I also lost Riles. Steve Riley decided he didn't want to coach that year. He had other obligations, so I lost 6 starters and a coach who, he's just excellent. He's still around. He's still doing his thing.
And, of course, one of those guys you mentioned, Joe Leza, he was a 4-year starter. Yeah. So, I mean, to replace somebody like that, never mind the fact that he could hit, he was an also excellent defensive catcher as well. Yeah,
Joey started when he was a freshman. He had some growing pains as a freshman. He was a big kid. But as the year progressed, the seniors kind of took him under their wing. He did fine. And his sophomore, junior, and senior year, he continued to get better. And he had a real nice career at UNH. He was really hard to replace because for 4 years, whenever I had to put a catcher down, the number 2, it was always Joe Lees. There was no hesitation because he was there. So
right, and what's unique about your 2 championship teams? Yes, you had some studs. I mean, the 92 team, you had Bartone and you had Shepard, your big horses. You also had Pete Krasnowski. But you have to have those players, behind the scenes. You had Gino DeMoro, who gave you more than you could have ever thought. You had Joey Guyon, obviously, who gave you more than you ever thought. 96 team was very similar because you did have Steve Stoneha returning as a starter, right. Danny Ortiz, and Drew Davis. But you really had to fill a lot of spots with some guys who had never had varsity experience before. Talk about what your mindset was going into that first day of practice. I mean, did you think it was going to be a rough year?
Well, I thought we had the makings of a pretty good team. We had those 3 starters back, and then the other kids played a lot of JV ball, and the JV team was pretty successful. Now, how that was going to pan out for the varsity, I really didn't know. We kind of went back and forth, the coaches and I, and we came up with what we thought was the starting team, and we did it together. So we knew we had a first baseman in Danny Ortiz, but he couldn't play first because I didn't have a third baseman.
Right.
So Danny played third. He didn't like it, but he did it for the good of the team.
Right.
Then we had Sean Hayden, who really hadn't played in a couple years. He became the first baseman, but he wasn't a very good hitter. So we had Kevin Mittendorf as our DH.
Right.
And he did a great job as the DH. And the nice thing about Sean Hayden, he never questioned what we did about that. His not getting a chance to bat.
Right.
And then we had a freshman in George French,
right.
unproven, playing second base. Jason Krasnowski became the catcher. He really only caught JV. And then
you also had Craig Schutte play.
Craig Schutte was in the outfield as a freshman. So we didn't know we knew he was a good athlete, but we really didn't know what we were going to get from him. And
I think Henry Alisea
played left field. He
right.
was just a JV player as a sophomore. So it was really an interesting year. And, like I said.
And you also, keep in mind, Gary Pompa started in, for you guys in left field as a junior, but he didn't bat that year. So now this would be his first year batting. So he lost a year of hitting. Yeah.
Absolutely right. So I could tell you this, did a little research. After the first 5 games, we were 1-4.
Right.
And the team that we beat was West Haven, which was unbelievable. But
right.
Davis pitched a great game. We were able to win. But we knew we had to make some changes because we were trying to just flip-flop Stoneha and Davis to play shortstop. But Steven was just not a shortstop. So what we did was we talked about it, and Gary Pompa was one of the best athletes we had on the team. So when we needed him, he played shortstop, but that was usually when Davis pitched. So when Davis pitched, Gary Pompa played shortstop.
Right.
So then when Davis didn't pitch, Davis played shortstop and Pompa played center field.
Right.
So this poor young man was asked to do a yeoman duty, and he was really up for the challenge because he'd come down right after school. I'd hit him 50 fly balls in center field, and then I'd hit him 50 ground balls
right.
to play shortstop and teach him the different techniques at shortstop, making the double play, covering on a steal,
right.
our pickoff plays. So he was really a key factor in helping us out. So, he was unselfish about it. He wanted to do it. And if I could just, in the 2-0 game against West Haven, they had guys on second and third, and they hit a line drive up the middle, and he made a diving catch to end the game and preserve the win. So, he just made himself a better player. He sacrificed himself for the game.
If you don't win that game, I mean, there's no championship. You're not going to make the tournament.
Right.
So,
Absolutely
it was a defining win.
It was a defining moment. It really was. But the two games that I thought were clutch were towards the end of the season. I think we played Amity, and Amity had beaten us pretty badly the first time.
Right.
We needed that win, so we ended up going to Amity, and the kid who got a big triple to drive in 2 runs was George French, who is now the head football coach at Derby High School. He was another freshman. So he won the game, and we won that game. And then we had to beat. That put us in I think at 10-9. Okay,
or 9-10.
9-10,
right.
And then we played a Branford team. Now Walt Novak was the coach at Branford, and he was like a friend of mine. He was a funny guy.
Right.
He didn't quite know how to take me because I wasn't funny when it came to baseball. I was really serious.
Right.
So he comes to Derby. We have to win this game to assure that we're going to get into the tournament. So he goes on and tells me that he doesn't have 4 of his starters because they went on a trip to Europe to the Glee Club for the Glee Club. So we ended up winning that game 3-2, and Davis pitched the win. It was a great win.
Right.
Now that put us at 10-9, and that was ironical because the next game Stonehaw pitched. He had some scouts there from Eastern Connecticut, and we got beat by Sheehan, who had only won 4 games that year,
right.
7-5. So now we end the season at 10-10, but on a losing note.
Right. And, sometimes you that's a momentum killer, too. You don't know
Absolutely.
how you're going to go into. But talk about the tournament. I mean, really, that kind of put Drew Davis from a good player to a great player. I mean, the way he pitched in that tournament, talk about that a little bit.
Well, he was ready for the tournament. He was excited. I think the kids were excited. And again, like I said, when I talked to him after we had gotten beat by Sheehan in the last game, I still believed that we had played all those teams, Lyman Hall, Cheshire, West Haven, Shelton, that we could compete in the S tournament. And he was very excited about that. The kids were excited about it.
Right.
We played Windsor Locks in the first game, and we had to go to Windsor Locks because being ranked 20th, all the initial first and second round games were played at the site of the higher seeded team.
Right.
So we go up to Windsor Locks, and we take batting practice in this pasture, and and the guy said, "Well, gee, try not to hit the parking lot over there." And we hit the parking lot by accident and broke a window. It was really fun. So we got the guy's attention. We ended up winning the game 3-0. Davis pitched the 3-hitter. He got a timely hit. Krasnowski got a timely hit.
Right.
And so did French got a timely hit. So, that was a good win. That got us thinking that we could win. It was a positive. We ended on a positive note with that game.
And the difference between the 96 and 92 team as far as the tournament went, 92, they had to scratch and crawl to win every game. The 96 team, in a lot of ways, you guys made some of those games look easy. I mean, you never really felt like you guys were in trouble, especially the championship game. It just looked like,
right.
Everything was in hand, and this was destiny, and it wasn't going to stop you guys.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Mike, in what you say, because as we continued along in the tournament, excuse me, we realized that we could compete. We could compete with anyone. So, like I said, Windsor Locks was the 13th ranked team. Then we had to play Norwich Tech.
Right.
So, the interesting part about that is that we had to go up there. We went there in the rain.
Yeah.
They made us travel for 2 hours and ended up canceling the game, which was rather annoying because it had been raining the whole day.
Yeah.
So we had to go back 2 hours, practice, and then make the trip back, which, could have taken its toll on the kids, but they accepted it. We went back. We beat them 11-2.
Right.
Stonehaw pitched a great game, and it was a nice victory considering we had to make that trip twice.
Right. And if I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe you had to play Sacred Heart up at Nolan Field.
That's exactly right.
And I mean, that had to be, after having so many like disappointments on the football side of things on that field, it had to be nice to win on that field. And, you know, you guys made it look easy that night.
Yeah, we did. Well, don't forget again, Davis pitched. He pitches
Right.
a 3-hitter. We win 3-0. 3-0, and we get some timely hitting. We stole a few bases. We bunted a few times.
Right.
And we end up getting the win. They were an NVL team. We were a Housatonic League team.
Right.
So that was added incentive. A little did I know that eventually we would become an NVL team.
Right.
But it was nice. They were very, very, they were good. They were ranked 12th. So we knocked them off. And I forgot to mention that Norwich Tech, even though they were a Vogue Tech team, they were seeded 4th.
Right.
So it was nice to play the quarterfinal game at Sacred Heart. At Nolan Field, and play Sacred Heart.
Right.
It was a great win. That I think was a key game. But as we go on, I'll tell you a few other things.
Right. So talk about the semifinal game, because again, I mean, you know, you guys got a great victory, and again, I believe Davis pitched again and pitched tremendous.
Pitched again. Well,
Right.
we caught a break, Mike, with the weather. I mean, the weather was such that he could pitch against Immaculate too, because the game was pushed back another day.
Right.
So I asked him again. I mean, really, you have to ask the young man. You don't want to hurt his shoulder. Can you pitch? Do you want to pitch? He says, I absolutely want the ball. So I said, that's unbelievable. So Jeff was like, his brother was an assistant coach, and I said, Jeff, what do you think? He says, well, if he wants the ball, we'll give him the ball, but we'll monitor him and make sure that he's not laboring. And that was exactly it. So we go down and play Immaculate at West Haven.
Yeah.
It's a semifinal game. We win the game 2-1. Now I
Right.
can tell you how we won this game. Would you be interested in?
Sure.
It was 1-1. It was the top of the 6th. Gary Pompa walks to lead off the inning. He steals second base.
Right.
We bunt. And Shooty beats out the bunt. So now we got first and third. So we had practiced like Shooty breaking early, or the runner from first breaking early. Then I told the kid at third base, and Davis was aware of it. As soon as the pitcher, because the pitcher had a habit of turning his back, and I says, as soon as the pitcher turns his back to throw to second, break for home.
Right.
So that's what happened. Shooty breaks early. Here comes French. He slides under the tag, and we win the game 2-1. And then the last inning, Davis strikes out 3 guys in a row,
Right,
and he
yeah.
preserves the victory.
Yeah, I mean, again, a game like that, you just know, and you have so much confidence going into the final because you win a
Right.
game like that.
They were like the 9th ranked team. So now, again, I really believed that we had a very, very good chance to win on Saturday. So and that was an afternoon game. So
Right.
again, Davis had the opportunity to pitch, and he just said, I want the ball. So
Right.
I learned a long time ago, when somebody tells you they want the ball, you give them the ball.
Right. And Stonehall was very good about it. He wasn't upset. He, wanted to win. He was doing what
Stonehall did a great job in the outfield. So
Right.
the thing about poor Steven, and he goes on to have a nice college career, he had pulled a muscle in his chest at the beginning of the season, maybe because of the cold, whatever it was. He pulled a muscle, and he was really never able to bounce back from that,
Right.
where he could throw effectively. He could throw, but not as well as he had thrown when he was a junior.
Right.
So, you always have to keep the health of the player in mind. It wasn't my position to, it wasn't my position to play him if he was not at 100%. So the games that he did win, he pitched as well as he could.
Right.
And like I said, he won the one game against Norwich Tech.
Right.
And he didn't want to come out of that game. But Davis won the 4 other ones. So Stoney did what he had to do, and he played a great outfield. He made about 3 or 4 great catches, especially against Sacred Heart to preserve that win in Ansonia.
Right.
He made a diving catch in left or right center field to preserve the win. So, he was a great contributor to the team. Like you said, he had a great attitude about understanding that Davis was the hot pitcher and that we wanted to go with him. But I certainly respected what he did for the team.
Right. And, again, very comparable to the 92 team. In that game, Sean Hayden made some great plays at first base. I mean, he saved 2 runs, I believe, on the plays he made. Mittendorf was hitting the ball great that day, and it's kind of like Guyon and DeMoro from the 92 team.
Right.
These guys may not have stole the headlines, but they always did the little things to help this team win. I mean, did you go into that last inning feeling confident that you guys were going to win that game?
I thought we were going to win it. Once we got the lead, I thought that we would win it. And you just said about you just mentioned some. Krasnowski was 2 for 4, and he drove in 2 runs that game. So.
Right.
And Mittendorf, as our DH, got 3 hits. I think 2 of them were bunt singles.
Right.
So once the last inning came and we were ahead 8-5, I just wanted Davis to go out there and just throw fastballs because I thought we could do that. And it was only one time that I get upset. I didn't really call the pitches, but in tight situations I did because that took the pressure off Krasnowski.
Right.
So I called a fastball. He threw a curve. I went out to the mound. I said, look, if I call a pitch, throw the pitch. I asked you to throw. They just nodded their heads, and I walked off the mound.
Right.
And the umpire says, did you really speak your mind? I said, no, I just was forceful enough to.
Right.
I know the difference between a fastball and a curveball. That wasn't a fastball.
Right.
And they went on to win. It was really fun because again, we came out of nowhere to win it.
Right.
There's a funny story if you'd like me to tell
you.
Before the tournament started, I said, if you win the tournament, I'll let you cut my hair. I said, I'll let you shave my head. Okay, and I got a big head, so I said, cause that's how anything to motivate kids. Well, we win the tournament, so now we go back to the school, and Mr. DiCenso has a big pizza party. Little do I know that Davis and the other seniors, they have a razor.
Oh boy!
So I said it, so they did it. And thank God. Krasnowski's brother was there, and he kind of like straightened it out a little bit. But that was on a Saturday, so Monday I went to school. But I wanted to go to school because I wanted to show them that I wasn't embarrassed by what happened. That, hey, when you say something, you got to carry through on it. Just like I want them to carry through on things that I asked them to do. So I went to school, and of course that was the joke. I think I had to go on stage, and they kind of looked at me. But so that Monday or Tuesday, I had to wait because the barbershops are closed on Monday to get my hair straightened out, the little that I had. But that was fun. So, and that was fun for them. So.
And, it's funny you bring up getting your hair cut because I do remember now that you say it, they had the red and white game that following week, and you were there coaching, and I remember saying, what did he do to his hair?
Right.
Because I'd never seen your hair that short, ever.
Well, like I said, I try to keep as much hair. When you start to lose your hair, you try to keep as much as you have so you don't lose any more. But it was funny that you said that because when I threw out the first pitch the other day, they took a shot of it, but they took the shot from in back of me throwing the pitch. So my wife said, wow. You're really bald. Like there's nothing here. So between Tom Fay, who was really bald, really, really bald, and me, who was really bald, it was quite the thing. Now, if you added up our ages, that's about 148 years old right there. So, but it was a lot of fun. And like I said, whatever motivates kids, you try to do it. And that's what I did.
Right. Now, let me ask you, it's hard to compare them. I would think the first one always has to kind of be slightly ahead because it was the first one. But the 2 championships you won, was there one that felt better than the other?
Well, I tell you, the 96 championship team, to me, it was totally unexpected. I mean, that team, you talk about Cinderella, they are the definition of a Cinderella team.
Right.
There was no way that I thought we were going to win it. I wouldn't tell the kids that, but that was really an uphill battle. I thought the 92 team had more weapons. So
right.
I thought if we got into the tournament with Benjamin and Donnie, that we would be, much more competitive. But I underestimated Davis' tenacity.
Right.
And I underestimated Stoneha's resilience, and the fact that this young man, Gary Pompa, and Kevin Mittendorf, and Sean Hayden,
right.
kids that I never expected who were going to produce. Georgie French,
yeah.
Schutte, Craig Schutte, that they would ever play as well as they did.
Right.
And that was the amazing thing, to watch the maturation as the year went on. Those kids became a solid unit.
You know what I find ironic, though? Let's compare a little bit. Ben Bartone gets hurt in the 4th game of the year against North Haven and breaks his wrist. He has to miss 3 or 4 games. He comes back the last 3. He just wasn't the same. Derby, loses to Shelton. They have a losing season. Let's talk about Drew Davis. He gets hurt in the 3rd game of the year playing quarterback for Derby. Breaks his, I think he broke his hand, something like that. His finger, yeah. He had to miss 3 or 4 games. He comes back. Derby, it wasn't enough. Derby gets a losing season. They go 4-6. And then both these guys redeem themselves, and, these kids redeem themselves in the baseball season. And, I mean, It's amazing how they kind of both are similar.
I never really thought about that, Mike, but now that you bring it up, that's a great, great point. But when you talk about those 2 young men, when you talk about Ben Bartone and you talk about Drew Davis,
yep.
Those 2 kids, their love was football, but their passion was baseball.
Yeah,
they loved the game of baseball. And Andrew, when I saw that he hurt his finger, I said, "Here we go again." But it healed, but it got raw as the year went on.
Right.
He used to stick it in pickle brine to toughen the skin up,
right?
So that it wouldn't open up. But I think towards the end of the year, the innings that he pitched, and his endurance was unbelievable. I don't know what would have happened if they have this pitch count rule. They started that
right
this year or last year with the. I don't think he would have been able to pitch as much as he did, because there was no way he would have been able to pitch.
Keep the pitch
game
limit down, right?
Yeah, he just was a tough kid. And so was Bartone.
The other thing is, I'll just bring up Drew, Pompa, Dan Ortiz, Jay Krzyzanowski, because they played football. They had so many tough losses over the years, to Aunt Sonia, when they played Pop Warner, when they played as freshmen, seniors. And it was kind of fitting for them that same day, Aunt Sonia got beat in the championship game on that same field.
Right.
And then they were able to come there and win on that field. So they finally got some type of payback. I'm not saying they beat Aunt Sonia and got the payback, but at least for once they went home happy, where it was always Aunt Sonia who went home happy.
That's exactly right. And it's funny that you should say that, because on the day that I threw out our pitch, I think the day before at Aunt Sonia, they unveiled the 500 wins that Mike Vaca accrued over his
40 years.
40 years of coaching. So, to do something like that, it was phenomenal. To beat Aunt Sonia in anything, I think, is a feather in kids' hats. Even though, the rivalry is never really, outwardly spoken about, especially by the coaches. But, the kids understand it, and they feel it. So it was wonderful to win it in Ansonia, and plus the bus ride was only like a mile down the road, so that was nice too.
Right, and you decided to step aside after that year. You decided you just kind of wanted to be an assistant. You went to Seymour for a year and went back to the championship game. That had to be a lot of fun as well.
Yeah, it was. I didn't really go to the championship game that Seymour had because I was a football coach at Derby first.
And they had the red and white game.
They had the red and white game. So I did not go to the championship game, and they lost that game, I remember.
Right.
But, yeah, I did. But what I did at Seymour, I just kind of hit fungos, and then I just kind of went home. I didn't stay for the whole practice.
Oh, so it was more
I wasn't involved in, like, the strategy or what they did.
Right.
I went to the games. If I wanted to stay, I stayed. If I didn't, I didn't. That's how I did it. So I kind of eased myself out that way. And then when Saccharin took over, I went 1 year, but I really didn't enjoy it. I think, like Mr. DiCenso, Charlie, when you're the head coach, it's very hard to come back as an assistant.
Right. Especially when you've had success.
Exactly. So I said to myself, I just should step aside and just let these people do what they have to do.
Right. You're talking about Charlie. It's obvious the relationship you had with Charlie, Frank Alu, Johnny Occo, D'Onofrio, but the relationship you had with Steve Riley and George DiTullio, I mean, those guys were with you from the start pretty much.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So just talk about them a little bit.
Well, Steve, he's probably the best baseball man I know. I mean, there's nobody who prepares himself more for a game than Steve does. I mean, when Steve calls a pitch, like he calls all the pitches at Seymour, I know, and he's got charged from 2 or 3 years ago, or 2 years ago,
right,
on batters that they had on teams, batters from those teams that he played against. So when he calls a pitch, it's just not at random. He's calling the pitch because he knows the hitter's weakness, and he knows, what pitch should be thrown. And the other thing is he has just a tremendous grasp of the game.
Right.
He just knows situations. He knows how to fungo. He knows how to get the most out of kids. He's a great motivator, and like I said, I think if he had the time and he could be a varsity coach anywhere he wanted to be. So.
Right, and he's still coaching today. So
he's still involved with the Seymour team.
Right.
And George was just George. George came, he wanted to be involved. And
well, I always say he took the role that you had with Charlie. George took that role with you because you couldn't really you had to motivate, but you had to be the head coach too.
Right.
So George took that role as the motivator.
George was a motivator. George just loved the kids, and he related to the kids, and the kids related to George. They loved him. I mean, George came to practice, and they just lit up. I mean, the kids were just excited when he was around, and he sort of gravitated towards, quote, the tougher, unquote, kids on the team, and they kind of gravitated towards him. So I never had to worry about those kids because they would say, Coach DiTullio, take care of this problem, and he did.
Right.
And the kids respected him. And, one time we were walking the track, and he said to me, I don't fill a vital role on the coaching staff. I said, you're crazy. I said, you don't understand the role that you fill and how important you are to me and to these kids. And as we were walking, he was just kind of looking at me, and I says, there's not many people who can do what you do, how you do it, and the fact that you work swing shifts all over the place, and the fact that you're there without sleep, you're there before you go to work. I mean, that speaks volumes. The kids realize what you sacrificed. I said, when we won it, qualified in '92, do you understand that their first reaction after they celebrated was to run to the field house to call you?
Yeah, because he had to work that day.
Yes, he had to work. He couldn't get out of it. So I said, if you think that you're not a valuable part of this coaching staff, you are sorely mistaken, my friend. And like I think as we were walking along, he like kind of filled up. Here's this big man, like very, very, very sensitive about that stuff. And you know, he just wanted a chance to coach and be around kids, and he really was important. You know, so
right.
I'm glad he was on the staff.
Oh yeah, definitely a invaluable part of that staff. You know, one of the best things about coaching and stuff is you get to share a lot of funny stories because it's not always, you know, all business. There are funny things that happen. You kind of brought this up a little bit at the Hall of Fame ceremony. So tell all the listeners, you know, what it was like playing with Coach DiCenso and when he would wear, you know, the ankle, you know, pants or whatever it was. Tell that story a little bit.
when in football, the linemen always wore high-top shoes.
Right.
And high-top shoes used to bother me all the time, you know. So back then, you bought your own shoes. Okay, so I bought a pair of low tops, or low shoes, or just regular shoes. And the first day of practice, I put like black tape around it so that Coach Carbone wouldn't know about it. So a few of the kids saw that, and they went out and they bought regular shoes. So Charlie was kind of the last one to do that.
Right.
Now, again, when Charlie was in high school, he was a big boy. He was probably about 240.
Yeah.
And when he wore the high top shoes, the fat from between the ankle and the shin would hang over the shoe. So I said, look at Coach, look at Charlie. He's got like cankles. It's funny because that I mentioned it because now my grandson, he's got cankles because his ankles are fat. But that's how that came about, you know. But needless to say, he was a great player, and I don't have to tell you he was a great coach. But that was a funny story because, like, he just didn't understand what I meant. I said, go look in the mirror and see your fat ankles hanging over your high-top shoes.
You know, I remember one story you told about going to eat with Ronnie Leno. I don't know if you'll remember it, but just tell me what that was like when you and Ronnie Leno would go somewhere to eat. Tell me what a Ronnie Leno meal consisted of.
Well, like I said, when I coached with Ronnie, I had a great time. And Ronnie and I, we kind of like, he had a special relationship with Mr. DiCenso. I didn't have that same type of closeness, you know, but I loved him. I had him in class. Probably he didn't really like me as much because once a week I had to throw him out because he just got out of control every now and then. But anyways, when I coached with him in the American Legion, when we coached Guilford Legion.
Right.
Our home base was Guilford. We traveled from Derby to Guilford.
Right.
And he'd always pick me up. I said, I don't want to drive to Guilford. He said, you don't have to do anything. Just have to coach with me. And I'll pick you up. I'll take you home. We'll go out to dinner. We'll go out to eat after the game, of course. At a Ronnie Leno store, you always have to have a meal.
Right.
That's it. Now, he's going to hear this, and boy, is he going to give it to me. But anyways, so the best story that I know, we always used to stop on the way home on 95, and they always used to have a Subway, and then they had the chicken place that was next to it. So Ronnie would go in there. I think it was Kentucky Fried Chicken or something, and he'd go to order two pieces of chicken and coleslaw. Then we go to the Subway, and he get a foot-long Subway and chips.
Right.
I said, Ron, you already had chicken. He says to me, hey, does the pitcher warm up in the bullpen? I said, yeah, I guess they do. So he says, well, the chicken's the warm up. This is the main meal. But we had some great times. We talked a lot driving wherever we drove. And it wasn't always about baseball either. It was just about fun times that we had shared over the years. Because, see, Ronnie's dad and I, we kind of grew up together in Lakeview Terrace. So I knew. And
I think he graduated a year before, or maybe the same year.
Yeah. I think he graduated. He graduated 64.
Right.
But when I found out that Ronnie Sr. had cancer, I was like crushed, you know. And I saw him at Di Giovanni's restaurant a couple times, and he had trouble chewing and eating.
Right.
But the last time I saw him now, a couple weeks ago, he had brand new teeth, and he was just so happy that he had beaten it and that the cancer was gone. And like I said, Ronnie's dad and I go back a long way.
And he's a great guy.
He really was. And when he worked for the city, he was very, very respectful, because he used to go into the old crickets, and my wife used to stop there before school, and he introduced himself, and he always said hello, and every time he saw her, he did. So my wife said, he's a gentleman. I said, absolutely. He's a great guy.
Right. One of the things you're famous for, Coach, is your pep rally speeches. They are legendary. And we had a poll a few weeks ago on the Hall of Fame site. We were asking, what's your favorite John D moment? And a few people brought up the Housatonic Valley Regional Pep Rally, where you didn't know where it was, and you said Falls Village or Falls River. I mean, let me ask you, did you just do all that on the fly?
On the fly. Everything, like those pep rallies were like on the fly, because look, the word pep rally means you want the kids
to get fired up,
excited. I mean, you teach kids in school, be quiet and pay attention.
Yeah.
But when you get to the pep rally, cut loose.
Right.
Like I said, I mean, I loved Mr. Allo, I loved Mr. DiCenso, Mr. Zuba, God have mercy on his soul. But, I like to thank the band. I like to thank the cheerleaders. That's Mr. DiCenso. He didn't like it. He didn't want to go up there.
Right.
See, me, I wanted to go up there.
Yeah.
I wanted to stir him up. So when Housatonic Valley Regional thought, I read in the paper that they had a chance.
Yeah.
I said, they had two chances, slim and none. So let's put the cards on the table. Then when I said the wrong place that they came from.
Oh, Falls Village.
Village. The place went nuts.
Or Falls River.
Falls River.
It was Falls Village,
It's Falls Village. So, but, to do the prep assemblies was just, my adrenaline was flowing the whole day. But honest to God, Michael, I could tell you as a friend, I never knew what I was going to say before I got up there.
You just got up there.
I just got up there and felt the vibration of the kids. And like when they called my name, I was always the last one to speak. I didn't like that at first, but then I understood why, because
saved the best for last, yeah.
So I used to get up there and really, really motivate the students. And the funny story was, my wife, now we've been married that was like, she taught at the high school one year. She went to one pep rally. She couldn't believe how excited the student body got. And then when she saw me at the pep rally, she says, wow, this is like crazy. I mean, I could, the room would be rocking.
Right.
You were there.
Right. Oh, yeah.
Like the walls would be shaking, I remember Mr. Gers used to say, please don't tell the kids to get up and walk out of the school, because they would have. I said, let's get out, let's go. And I was really, especially like the Ansonia game, the Shelton game.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun. I tried to make it enjoyable. I tried to be me.
And there were times they put you on the front page of the paper showing you walk down there. So, I mean,
that's exactly right.
And you know what? I mean, no matter if you're 10 years old or you're 40 years old, you still get a good feeling when you see something about yourself. I mean, some people don't like to brag about themselves, but sometimes you want to be recognized. And I mean, it had to be a good feeling to see your picture in the front page.
Yeah, it was nice. I really, the limelight doesn't bother me if I don't really need to be in it, but I just try to be myself.
Right.
I don't try to assume errors. I don't try to be better than anybody else. I don't try to come off that way. Like I said, if I talk to Mr. Boehner now, Coach Boehner,
right.
I didn't talk to him last year at all. He came and searched me out this year. He wanted to know a few things, what I would do in a few situations. I told him. I specifically remember one time he was playing a poor. They weren't very good. I can't remember if it was Wilby or. He was going to pitch a kid that had never pitched before. And it was about the 60th game of the year. I said, I wouldn't do that. I'd pitch my best kid and take the victory. And he didn't. He pitched, of course, who we wanted to. And then they lost. But,
right.
and And I didn't say anything to him because that's his decision. It's his team. But, I think if they had won that game, there'd be no doubt that they'd be in the tournament now.
Right.
But it was unfortunate. But like I said, I really enjoyed staying for the game because I was going to leave. And he says, no, I want you to sit in the dugout. So I sat in the dugout and I talked to the younger kids. And it brought back really great memories because that's what my dad used to do when I coached.
Right.
So they would sit next to me, and I was watching the game and watching what he did. So he has a really good take on the game. And the kid he has is his assistant, Julian Sobin.
Right.
I think he's going to be very, very good. So I enjoyed the game. They beat Ansonia 4-0 the day I was there.
Right.
So I think he's going to be fine.
Right. Let me ask you this. You obviously the championships in both sports you coach are always going to be the best, but was there ever one season in either sport you coached where you didn't have the most talented team, but you got something out of them and had a decent year? Is there any that stand out to you?
Yeah, I think the year after the 92 team, the 93 team, we were totally depleted. Excuse me. I think we had about 2 kids who played, and there were sophomores who played, and we ended up the season 7-13. I apologize. 7-13, which I thought was amazing because we really didn't have a great pitcher.
Right.
Nobody who was established. Kids who threw that really weren't ready to throw, but that I had worked with for that week, who worked in the off season to make themselves. That team there was interesting.
Right.
That was the 93 team. That kind of they had to play. And my first year coaching,
Right.
we were 5-15, but lost 6 games by 1 run. And I remember that so clearly because I was like really critical because, like I said, as a coach, I'm supposed to make a difference in that game. I'm supposed to get that run. And I remember, like, my dad, he was alive then, and he said to me, there are a lot of times you're supposed to win and you don't. That's just what happens. But that year was memorable because it was so crazy. It was 7-6, 6-5, 5-4, 4-3, and Steve and I were like banging our heads against the wall to try to figure out what we could do to win.
Right.
We even lost a game on a pop fly to the pitcher that dropped in. I said to myself, we're just not destined to win here. So it was a tough year, but it was a learning year because the year after we made the state tournament for the first time. So was my first year, and I'll always remember those kids.
Right. One of the best stories in the Fat Lady Never Sings book is a person by the name of Nick DiRubba. Did you want to tell that story a little bit?
Oh, I could talk about Nick DiRubba. Nick DiRubba will always be like one of my favorite people. There's people who are like underdogs that you just love them because they work so hard, like yourself. I mean, you played on that football team and you never said a word about playing time or anything else. And I said to Ronnie, and I'm sure Ronnie has told you because you're close to Ronnie.
Right.
You played JV as a senior, and I said to myself, that's like unbelievable that this kid would do that. I mean, it takes a special person to do something like that.
Well,
I admired you, and I respected you for that because we really needed players.
Right.
And you stepped up and you wanted to play. And that was great. Nicky DiRubba was just he was just such an underdog kid. He wanted to be a part of something.
Right.
He wanted to get involved. And I had Nick in class. And Nick, every now and then, he'd sit in the chair there, but he was like, you could hear like mumbling, and it was Nick. And I'd yell at somebody else, but Nick was the one who was talking.
Right.
So, and then he wanted to get involved with the baseball team. So he said, you could be the manager. He kept the book. He chased foul balls. He went where no people could fit to find 5 balls underneath bleachers and everything. Nick would come out with 3 balls. But I just loved them to death. I mean, I always had my arm around them. I always walked with them everywhere you went. And then he gave me a ride home, and I remember so specifically. He had the pedals on the gas, accelerator, and the brake. I said, Nick, am I safe here? He says, absolutely. And the seat was up. I was down. I said, oh, my God. But he was just a wonderful kid. And then when he played that JV game,
Right.
you know, I said to myself, there's DiRubba. He's on the field. I told this story. I was in the shower. I ran out of the shower. I put my shorts on. I'm running across the field with no shoes on. I said, get him out. Get him out.
Right.
I said to Andy Means, get him out of there. Get him out.
Right.
I said, I said, he doesn't have a physical. He's not approved. He's a dwarf. You can't play.
Right.
He makes a play in the field. He walks. He comes around to score. And like he writes it in the yearbook. I said, I'm dead. Because, again, Charlie, he's going to read every yearbook to make sure nobody puts it. He says, Mr. D, you want to come in my office? Do you realize that Nick DiRubba played on? I said, yeah, I do. So he says, he wasn't supposed to play there. I said, yeah. What was I going to do? He was already on the field before I could get. But anyways, Nicky he has a special place. And then the irony of the whole thing, he worked for Deloitte and Touche. He worked with my son-in-law.
Right.
Because my son-in-law came to the house one day. He said, Dad, do you know Nick DiRubba? I said, yeah. He says, boy, he loves you. He talks about you. And I said, well, that's really great. Of course I know Nick.
Right.
But there's so many people, like throwing out that first pitch. All the kids, they want to shake your hand. They want to give you a hug. That's what coaching's all about. That's what teaching's all about.
Right.
Like I could remember just yesterday I went for physical therapy and I see Nick Bartone's wife. I don't know who Nick Bartone married, but she was getting treatment and she said, are you Coach D? I said, well, yeah, my name is John DeFrancisco. He said, you know my husband and you know my father. So I said, well, your husband is? She said, Nick Bartone. He said, he talks about you all the time. Now, Nick, I coached in football. He played baseball. But he played for Ronnie. Right. But I got to coach him a little bit. In baseball, I coached him, the years he was there. He was very, very good. He says, he talks about you all the time. So you never... Sorry.
Don't worry about that. No problem.
So he was just, he was just a great kid. And to see his wife there. Now, also, her father is Steve Bloom. Now, I taught...
okay. He was a teacher, too.
Right. I taught industrial arts with Steve Bloom. Now, Steve Bloom is still teaching at 72 years old at Bassick High School.
Wow.
So it was like you never know where you're going to meet people whose lives that you've touched. He said...
Right.
Because I'm walking on. I says, hey, make sure you say hello to your husband and your father-in-law. He says, you don't know the impact you had on...
the thing I always say is when you work with kids, as years go on, they get older, so you're not always going to recognize them. You're not always going to remember them, but they're always going to remember you because you look the same, like I said, as you do when you had them. You might be a little older, but they still remember the face. And so, I mean, when you have them come up to you, sometimes you may not know who they are, but it's a good feeling to know they remember you. Yeah,
it's like when I saw you on the TV when you were with Coach DiCenso, I think.
Right.
I was just proud that he was there. But I was also proud in the job that you did interviewing him. I said, gee, that's great. That's unbelievable. So I said, I'm glad he was successful. He's doing something that he loves. He's involved with sports, and he does a great job at it. So you never know where you're going to meet people.
Right.
So, the lives that you're going to touch. So I think as a teacher, you run like it's important because you're going to influence lives, and hopefully you influence for the positive. Right. I just hope I influence more positive than negative. So.
And you talk about Mr. Bloom, but you yourself are still teaching on a part-time basis. Right. You're still at the high school 2 or 3 times a week. I mean, you're still enjoying that. Let me ask you this, too. You've been coaching at Platt Tech for the last 7 years. How's that been?
Oh, it's been a different type of experience. Coaching tech kids is a lot different than coaching public school kids. Because tech kids will miss practice because they go on the job. Like
Right.
I have a right tackle he's a big Polish kid, and I have a lot of fun with him, because I says, you eat a lot of kibasi and slumguzhin and all this stuff. And he laughs because, he's about 6'3", about 235. He can play.
Right.
But like one day he doesn't come to practice. He never missed. He had to go on a job because he's like an electrician.
Right. And you have to let him do it. Yeah.
And he has to go. So the center is a plumber. Had to go on a plumbing job. So I said, where's the team? But then as you coach those kids, you come to realize this is what you have to expect. And it's part of it's just part of their nature. And I think the best thing they did is Evoke Tech, they made their own league so they don't have to compete with public schools, because they really don't have a chance. And you see that when they get into the playoffs in football sometimes. It's really...
Yeah, but
It's just... But it's fun for me because I've been... I coached at great places. I coached a few years at Prep. I coached at Derby for all those years. But to go coach over there, to teach kids who really don't know anything about football, the game is just... It's pleasurable. And I'll probably do it this year and that.
Well, Coach, it's been fun again. It's hard to believe it's been 2 times already, and we'll definitely get you back on to talk about Platt Tech as the summer goes on. But one thing I want to add is on June 21st, Coach DeFrancisco, Coach Riley, Ben Bartone, and Gino DeMauro will be on Hometown Heroes, and we're going to celebrate because it's the 25th anniversary of this great team, which is hard to believe. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun. And
it's going to be a great time.
And I really do appreciate you coming on again. Thank you again.
Thank you for asking me.
And that was Coach John DeFrancisco, legendary coach. I'm Mike Cannici saying goodbye, everyone.